Hello, I'm Trey. I help manage the Stepping Stone to charity with my colleague Harry. We we're both volunteers and we've both brought quite a lot of our own personal experiences into the charity to help others. We've been doing a series of podcasts recently, and a lot of those have been on anxiety. And also, Harry and I have been discussing trauma and how that affects people's lives. And I've suffered from trauma for a long time. And one of the effects of that trauma is that I have a lot of anxiety. And I have found things in my life to help manage that anxiety. They aren't going to cure them, but they do help with the unease and the overwhelming effects of anxiety. This is just my personal opinion, my personal experiences, and my personal advice to others in the hopes that it will help them too. Anybody that's suffering in that way, to be able to do some activities or think about things that they could connect to help them. It's not just the activities, it's how you do those. And I'll try to explain that the best I can. One of the things that I have to manage is my space. I have a small space. It's not big, and I try to include quite a few activities in that space. So I'll give you a wee tour of that, and we'll come back and start discussing some of the activities I do. This is my space. It's a limited space, so I have to think about how I store things. That's Melody, looking after my bed. I keep all my crafting and also my workout stuff in this space. My small workstation. Do lots of work on there. And my little stack of art supplies, pencils and books. Well, this is a space I work in quite a lot. And I spend quite a lot of time in this room, so it has to be comfortable for me and enable me to focus. When you have a limited space like I do, I have to think about order. One of the things that will affect anxiety, from my experience, is clutter. Is lots of things that aren't in any kind of order, and you're scrambling around looking for things that actually can be cause anxiety and stress. So I try to have an ordered area. I have storage boxes, as you notice. I have little places where to put things. I keep them neatly together. I store things under my bed, and I have my books and my arts craft stuff together. I have my plates together for my craft and that kind of thing. So there is an order to this, so that I can go directly to where I want to be and find it easily. I'm not ratching around, and I'm not living in a load of stuff that's causing me anxiety because it looks untidy. That is one of the things I found helpful. The other thing is about connecting to what you do. I mentioned that earlier. There'll be lots of things that you can do to help manage your anxiety activities, but one of the things is connection to it. Does it do you connect to that? Now, you'll try some things and think, oh, it doesn't really work for me, and that's fine. Just back away from it, try something else. Because it is better if you connect to it, and it's brings more to you that way. It's more beneficial. One of the longest things I've done was something that was influenced from my family. Years ago, I remember my mum telling me about my gran making clothes for the girls, and it was a necessity because they didn't have a lot. And back then, people didn't. There's a lot more clothes around now, but you can get them easier. But back then, that wasn't the case. And so when I was growing up, I was aware of this, and also my mum and my gran and my aunts, they all knit. And again, it was a necessity. They did it to make things, and they adapted what they were doing to be able to afford that. Now, because the first thing I can think, imagine people say, well, wait a minute, knitting's expensive. I mean, making things these days has turned into something, handmade things is an expensive hobby, but I found ways to do it that isn't so expensive, work with a budget. I tried making clothes, it just didn't work for me. I can use a sewing machine, but following the patterns didn't come easy to me. So that's something I ditched. And then I tried knitting and that clicked. I'm not quite sure why it clicked, but I really enjoy knitting. For me, I had to connect to that. So it became a process. How do the knitting needles work for me? How does the yarn work for me? How does the pattern work for me? It has to be something that you connect to and works that way. Um, I also decided that some of the yarns that are advised to use in knitting patterns were too expensive for me, and I couldn't do that. So I started to what they call substitute yarn usage. So I would go to a market or a place where they sold yarn, and I'll buy things in a sale. And I had to learn about the weight of things, what yarn works with what needles and what pattern. And I was able to do that cheaper. A garment would cost me half the price to make than it would if I'd chosen the yarn that they suggested. The other thing as well is the internet. It's wonderful, and you can find free patterns online. If you Google that, and lots of things will come up, and you can print off what you want for a fraction of the price. Use substitute yarns, and away you go. I'm going to just show you briefly one of the garments I made last year. One of the things I like to do for me, and I like a wee bit of a challenge. So, sorry, stocking stitch was a wee bit, I do use that, but it can be a little bit not so focused for me, a little bit, my mind can wander. So I was attracted more to textured patterns, such as cable and other kind of texture. Now maybe it's my Celtic roots, because my family come from Ireland and Scotland. I love cable, and it takes a little bit more focus to make a cable garment, and that focus is beneficial. It's very beneficial for me, that and it helps me focus and immerse myself in the activity, and that's really important when you're dealing with anxiety. One of the reasons I would say that's important is because you can take your anxiety into the activity. And when you do that, you don't get as much out of it. You're actually doing the activity in an anxious state. I've noticed that in myself, and I've also witnessed it in others. So everything that you do, if you do it in an anxious state, you're not as beneficial. So anything that you are doing, try and be aware about how you're doing it. How do you feel when you're doing that? Are you connecting to what you're doing? I mean, I have a routine when I'm knitting. I kind of look to see, how far have I got? I feel the yarn. How does that feel? And I will look at the pattern. I'll remind myself how the pattern works. I keep notes as I'm going along, and I will knit that way, and I'll do it for so long, and I check again, and I'm aware of what I'm doing. I connect to what I'm doing. Now, that's not easy, and my mind can wander. And one example of that is this pattern, and it was a purchase pattern, it wasn't a free one. It had a mistake in it, and my mind wandered, and I didn't pick up on the mistake for a while. And then I realised it was going wrong, and I thought, all right, okay, this doesn't look right. And I not picked up on that right away because I'd not really connected on that for a while when I was doing it. So I had to unravel half of the front. You can imagine how frustrating that was. So that was something that happened because I hadn't been aware of what I was doing. And I don't mean you have to be constantly aware. I mean, just connect to it now and again. What am I doing here? Just don't do it in a mindless way. I suppose it's part of the mindful way of working. So that would be one piece of advice I would give you. Be mindful of what you're doing. The activity will work better for you and will help reduce your anxiety. Another the activities I do is paper crafting, and a lot of that is card making. I got into that a few years ago when I became physically ill from a chronic illness, and I've mentioned that on the blog, so I won't go too deeply into that. But I needed to find something that would help me. I felt I wanted something that was easy to do because lifting this can be quite heavy, and at the time I was very weak. So I went into paper crafting. It appealed to me, and there is definitely different ways to do it, and I tried different ways. And I'll show you a wee video tour of some of the things I've created. There's plenty of ways to make handmade cards. This is just an example of what I decided to do. I tried different things, and I went for using artwork and making my own embellishments. The metal plates at the bottom, the dies, they work with my little machine. I cut out things with card and felt, and I would make something like this, where the embellishments are everything made on the card. And also this is another example. If you're wondering why it's all Christmas cards at the moment, it's because Christmas is coming up and I have lots of those to do. I also like to make embellishments to complement artwork that I use on a card. And that embellishment there is made out of card and felt, cut out using various cutting dies. I don't have lots of them. I tended to have to be careful about what I actually bought, down to budget. So I was very choosy about what I bought. I looked at the ones I thought would be the most useful. The thing about the card making that really appealed to me was I could be creative, and I have done a little bit of adaptations with patterns, knitting patterns, but with card making that went to a whole different area, and I could be creative and make my own embellishments, and I could do that on a reasonable budget because I just needed coloured card, mirror card and some felt. And the artwork, I buy digital art, and I only printed off what I needed. I mean, I did try other things, but I found it quite expensive, so that's how I worked it. I really enjoy it. I mean, I learned about colour, about patterns, about balance. And also the other thing I really enjoy about that is I'm giving the cards to other people. When I make birthday cards and Christmas cards, it's always somebody in mind. Thinking about that person when I'm making the card. And I give everything away, you know, they're all to people in my life that mean something to me, and I give them these cards. I also have made models, and I've given those as gifts, like houses and lanterns done out of card. I've made flowers out of card on stalks. I've done a memory book for someone who was suffering from dementia with photographs and decorated it. I've done scrapbooking as a gift for a family member to remember a family. At Christmas I made boxes and I put chocolates in the boxes. I decorate the boxes, and when we go to the charity Christmas lunch, I take my Christmas card for everyone and a box of chocolates that I've made. and they're asking me about it in August. Have you sorted our cards yet? Have you sorted the boxes? So it's something for people to look forward to. It's only a wee thing, I know, but it does give a pleasure. But one of the things I was aware of when I started doing card making is that I started to get attracted to pretty paper. Now you could say, well, what's that? But pattern paper and pretty paper, you can get a little bit obsessional about that if you don't watch what you're doing. And I have to be aware of that because I was working with a budget. I remember visiting a crafting friend one day, and she was she wanted to show me how she did her card making, because it's always very interesting to see what do people do. And she tried all kinds of things, and she said, I'll show you my card making supplies, and me with one or two drawers. And she opened a closet, and it was like a closet that went a few feet back, and it was full to the brim with stuff. And I looked at her, I said, are you running a shop? She went, no, this is my stuff. She didn't know it was at the back of the closet. She hadn't been there for years. And it actually brought home to me about being careful about doing something, because she was doing card making to reduce her anxiety, but actually she brought her anxiety to the activity, and she became obsessional about buying things to do it, but not actually using the stuff she was buying. And it was costing her probably a lot of money. So that became an anxious thing. You've got to have the next thing that comes out. And you become anxious because you've got to have it. And when you get it, you think, oh, okay. And then it's the next thing that comes out. It's a bit like when you buy clothes and shoes and handbags and whatever it is that you become obsessed about. That's your anxiety driving you. So it was interesting for me to see that and go, okay, I need to be aware of that when I'm doing my activities, and I've always kept that in mind. I don't want it to put me in debt. I want it to be an enjoyable thing. So you don't need a lot to enjoy a thing. So that's a little bit of advice on that. The other thing I got into, and I got into this through the charity, was exercise. Now, because of my physical illness, chronic condition, I became very weak, and I had been doing some exercise. I'd always been an active person, but it impeded on that. I reduced my ability to do that. I got back into yoga, and I tried other things, and I'll show you about that. There is videos and stories on the blog about the history and the journey of that, not just for me, but the other people involved. So I hope you check that out and enjoy